Hello everyone. Okay, so in this lesson we are going to start looking at consuming API endpoint. Okay, so far we have been dealing with the static sort of data, and we designed our Redux store in a way that we were dispatching actions and we were reading state, but everything was local, right? We weren't calling any API endpoint. So this lesson is going to be all about handling the async operations, right? So what do we do when we have to perform a certain async operation within the context of Redux store? Because Redux store inherently only provides you a mean for performing synchronous operations, right? And that's where the concept of middleware comes in. And in this particular case, we are going to be looking at Thunks, right? So this is straight from the documentation. Redux flow is pretty much as you see. So we've got the UI. In our case, it's a to-do app. You create, delete, or whatever, action that you want to perform. You dispatch that action. There is a event handler, like action creator, forwards the action itself, which is a plain JavaScript object, right? And then we have a reducer, which looks at that and adjust the store accordingly. Okay, so if we look at what we've been doing, as I said, action is just a plain boring JavaScript object, nothing more than that. Okay, but to pass this sort of object around, we need an action creator, and that's what we've been doing, right, straight from our code. And once you dispatch an action through an action creator from a component, then the reducer basically picks it up and it makes certain decisions or adjusts the state accordingly. So a couple of things to talk about here. As I mentioned, Redux store only knows how to synchronously dispatch actions, update the state, and that's happening all through the reducer, right? But now that we want to perform operations using an API, like creating a new to-do, updating, reading to-dos and all that, that's called side effect. What is a side effect though? Well, side effect is anything in simplest terms. I mean, the documentation says that it is any change or state or behavior that can be seen outside of a returning value from a function. What does it really mean? What it means is, right here, what we're doing is we accept an action, then we look at the type of that action. In this case, it's create to do, and we just simply return a value, right? We're not doing anything outside of this application. We already have access to the state, and then we receive certain data and a type, and we add, for example, here to do to the state and return it. However, if I were to call an API endpoint from here or log something from here, that's going to be a side effect. You should never be doing that. Okay, so ideally this reducer should be returning a value. Okay, it shouldn't be responsible for making some API calls or doing things which are not local to this application. Okay, so what are other types of side effects? Well, as I said, logging a value to the console, that's a side effect. Saving a file or making any AJAX calls, these can be classified as side effects. Okay, so the point is, how do we deal with the side effects? Well, that's where Redux middleware was designed. These middleware then enable us to write the logic which can have some side effects. Okay, now let's go back. This is the usual Redux flow. Okay, so we've got the UI here. In our case, it's a to-do app. And when we want to create a new to-do, user submits the form. We listen for that event handler, the enter key, remember? We dispatch that through the action creator as an action to the reducer. Reducer then modifies the state, does not mutate the state, right? And the state is then being pulled to the UI, to our to-do app. Okay, how would it look like in terms of having middleware? Okay, well, this is how it's going to look like. And as I said, we are going to be using Thunk. Again, this is straight from the documentation. UI to-do app in our case. User fills out the form, enters the return or enters the enter key itself on the keyboard, okay, and we listen for that event, we dispatch, but this time we are going to be dispatching a Thunk action, okay. So that's the middleware. It sits between the normal action creator and whenever we are handling the event, okay. So it kind of intercepts, so we will be sending a Thunk action and that will call the external API, okay. Once we get the data from the API, then we will dispatch the normal action creator, which will have that information, and that will go to the reducer, and that way we will update the state, and the state in turn will update the UI. That's going to be the workflow for us. So in our code base, so before we were calling this action creator create new to do, remember? And that was then in turn handled by the reducer. Well, now we are going to be using the Thunk action, which basically is a function. It's nothing but a function, okay? And it has access to dispatch and it also has access to get state, okay? So we have these two available to us, and it's going to call an API. It will get the items, then it will dispatch. Here I've called it add to do success, but it's this create new to do, okay, and pass it a to do item and then the usual workflow. So this is how Thunk basically is going to play out in our application, okay. So in a nutshell, reducer shouldn't be dealing with any side effects. It should always be returning a value, okay. We went over what the side effects are, okay. In order for us to be able to deal with these side effects, like for example make an API call, we are going to utilize Thunk as a middleware, okay. So in the next lesson we are going to set up Thunk, and we are going to start refactoring our code so that we can successfully utilize Thunk, okay. So I will see you guys in the next lesson.